Hello and welcome to Shaking the B2B Tree, the podcast that brings you real stories, strategies and lessons from trailblazing marketers that think and act differently to achieve success. We'll be revealing practical solutions and valuable insights from the best in business to business, as they discuss their specialisms, share what works, what doesn't, and the lessons they've learned. Whether it's authentic storytelling, creating meaningful content, or generating real thought leadership, our guests have insights that can help you on the way to your next B2B marketing breakthrough. So let's get into today's conversation and see what we can shake loose. In this episode, we'll be discussing B2B leadership profiling. And to do this, I'm joined today by leadership communications expert Roanna Lynch, who, after many years in brand communications roles, recently set up Scribe Writing. And also with us is Claire James, Skout's Deputy MD. Okay, so Roanna, tell us a bit about your kind of career history to date.
Yeah, so I've worked across PR and marketing for about 15 years, starting out at Dyson, which took me to China and the US, all the way through to sort of B2B corporate wellbeing and everything in between, really. And over that time, I saw more of a trend towards people wanting that individual comment, that exec kind of profile raising, and that's what I focus on today.
Great. Okay. So I think you kind of set up your own outfit now doing exactly that. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So I set up Scribe Writing about 2 years ago, and we work with senior leaders who are looking to sort of raise their profile. That might be through new opportunities. That might be new leads. It might be speaking stuff. And they want to do that by building their personal brand. So that's really what we're doing now with leaders all around the world.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, we're all hearing about the importance of, having a niche these days. So you clearly got one, which is good. And that's why you're here today. The one standard question that we ask everybody is, what's your favorite podcast at the moment?
This is so hard because I am an absolute podcast addict. I think my ultimate favorite is Revisionist History. You've probably had other people say that by Malcolm Gladwell. And it's not a big history geek podcast like it sounds. It's about sort of things that have been overlooked or misunderstood. He always explains it. And if you only listen to one, the A Good Walk Spoiled episode will give you enough ammunition against anyone that plays golf for a lifetime. So I'd start there. Sounds good. I'll have to give it a go. Basically, I'm just using this podcast to draw up a list of podcasts to listen to, because every time I guess, this is my favorite, I'll add that to the list. So yeah, I've got quite a few on there now, which is good. So, okay, great. And the three of us are here today to talk about executive profiling, specifically in B2B, in the B2B market, particularly. Yeah. So, obviously it's not, executive profiling isn't a new thing, but I guess there's a lot of, we're all experiencing the change that's going on in the world of B2B marketing, and that just rolls on and on. So I guess the opening question to you, Roanna, is, what is executive profiling to you today? Yeah, I think for me, it's pretty simple, really. It's that process of humanizing a business, of making it that little bit less faceless, and the way you do that really is by building more of an awareness of the talent and the expertise and the opinions you have on your leadership team, building that outside the business so you get this kind of halo effect. And the way I always describe it is, the end result you want from leadership profiling is that someone says, "Oh, she's interesting. Who does she work for?" And it kind of leads people to you and your business that way.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Obviously, there's a proactive side to it. Leaders need to go out there and kind of make a name for themselves from that profiling perspective. But is it a mix of proactive and reactive efforts, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. And traditionally, it's always been the more reactive side of it, bit right? You provide a comment on breaking stories, you watch for what's happening, and then you put someone's name out there. But I think the big shift I've seen in leadership communications over the past couple of years is people being a lot more proactive about it. So understanding that in order to be the one whose comment is picked, you have to put in that proactive work first to make sure you're the go-to person. We know how full journalists' inboxes are. The way to stand out is by doing that proactive side of it. So I think we're all a lot more familiar with the reactive, but bringing in the proactive can really help support that reactive activity.
Yeah, and I guess kind of one leads to the other, doesn't it? You've got to go out there and set out your stall before
you're going to get more opportunities coming to you. I mean, there's obviously been some sort of horror stories from the past of not like execs going out trying to profile, but obviously business leaders saying the wrong thing in front of the camera and the impact that can have. So I suppose the more that you can do to kind of turn that on its head and try and create that positive impact in a proactive sense is a good thing.
That's it. We used to only get people in front of the microphone when something had gone wrong, that kind of classic crisis comms. But now people are seeing the benefit of going, actually, it makes no sense to only hear from our leaders when it's going badly. Let's cash in on the good times, and talk about that so that we have that kind of respect and that following and that profile, to help us through when we do have to do those crisis side of things.
Yeah, cool. Okay. CJ, what's your thoughts? I mean, obviously you've got lots of experience in B2B comms and PR generally. Have you got any kind of thoughts based on what Rose said so far?
I mean, I would say that I think there's two different types of leader, aren't there? There's the ones who are quite happy to remain in the shadows, who are happy to lead the company, but are quite happy to not have their profile pushed forward. And you've got those who are quite happy to be the star. So you think the Richard Bransons of this world, the Elon Musks of this world, who want to be front and center, who want to be the public face of their brand. But interestingly, before we had this call, I did a bit of quick Googling and thought, let's see who the top 100 CEOs are in the world. I reckon out of the top 100, I probably recognized half a dozen names, which means that executive profiling, really pushing forward the CEO or a COO, it doesn't necessarily come hand in hand with the CEO role. It's something that if you're comfortable with it, you will push yourself forward, or you'll work with your comms team to push your profile forward. But those who are uncomfortable with it are still quite happy to sit behind or at the sidelines and kind of let somebody else take that profile, let the business own the profile rather than them as an individual. I think it's quite interesting. So there were names on that list I'd never heard of.
Yeah. And do you know what? That's interesting though. Sometimes it's the quiet ones that are actually really good at the external profiling stuff because they don't rush into it. There's no kind of knee-jerk reactions. They take a really considered approach to how they present themselves. Often they're very nervous because they see the risks, and that actually makes them someone that's really great to work with. If you're supporting a leader who's an introvert, actually they can be a really useful tool on social media.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is interesting. Yeah, it's often the case, isn't it? The people that have got the best things to say aren't the ones who are going to go out there and sort of shout it from the rooftops and do need that kind of encouragement to bring it out of themselves a bit. I really hope that the prevalence of Trump and Musk, etc., isn't going to kind of drive a trend in just saying something to provoke a reaction amongst leaders. And that's the new trend that we're going to see over the next few years. That would be quite scary if we started seeing B2B leaders doing that on a regular basis. So
I do see some people sort of using that as a tool to, it gets instant engagement, right? It gets reactions. Yeah. And if that's your only metric, then you pick really reactionary stuff. But what I'm always advocating for is that sort of slightly slower approach to social media with CEOs, where it is more considered and it is more, building a thought leadership presence over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's a useful analogy, though, actually, because just thinking, if your objective is to be divisive, then great way to do it. But obviously, that's not going to work in a business environment usually. So. Yeah, it's the way not to do it for most of us. Anyway, getting off the politics, are there any kind of good examples other than obviously the ones we've mentioned? Other good examples that where leaders that you've really admired that have done a brilliant job of sort of getting their profile out there in a positive way that's had a business impact?
Yeah, I mean, someone who I'm watching really closely on LinkedIn at the minute is Amelia Christie Miller. And she's the sort of CEO and founder of the Bold Bean Company. And they're a relatively new company. I think they're only founded, a couple of years ago, and they're already in sort of Holland and Barrett, places like that. And she's taken on this incredibly stagnant traditional market, beans. How do you get people excited about beans? It's the ultimate kind of branding challenge. But, I look forward to her posts on LinkedIn because she's really bringing some of the kind of brand values and brand experience alive. She's really warm. She's really natural. She's personable. She's telling us story about the kind of how and why she's here, and she's doing all the right things that help a new brand seem really familiar and make them a safe choice compared to the Heinz's and the rest of the category. So I think she's doing a really good job of shaking up a category using her personal brand. And then I guess from a bigger business perspective, someone I've recently seen doing a good campaign actually is Lenovo. So they've just launched a Lenovo Leaders campaign, and they're interviewing people. And what's especially interesting about it is it's not just the kind of CEO they're going for. They're doing my sort of classic advice around having your Prince Harry, having your Prince William, having your kind of next in line. They're interviewing people like their SVP, their President of North America, and they're coming across really personable. They're linking their life experiences to what their current leadership style is. So they're doing a really nice job, I guess, as a business of bringing some of that human capital to their branding.
Yeah, there's good, interesting examples. I think there's a lot you can do with beans personally. So I can think of loads of scope. Be far more exciting.
It's the one for you to follow, Rob. You should just love Amelia on LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean the Lenovo example is good as well. I think because one thing we always advocate is trying to get that kind of rounded, getting everyone around the table, around this sort of executive table involved in some way, so that you don't just get that kind of one man, one woman show, which actually can make a business look a lot smaller than it is, or, can make a smaller business seem small. But that's something, CJ, we're doing with one of our clients at the moment, isn't it? In the FM space, quite a lot around.
It is, yeah. So they operate in a variety of different sectors. They've got heads of across, I think, 11 different business areas, but every one of them's had profile within the last 12 months. And it doesn't always fall to the CEO or the CPO. We've profiled all the executive board, but we've also profiled the heads of, because they're the real experts. As people want to hear from an expert in catering, they don't want to hear from the CEO. The CEO is too far removed from the day-to-day of catering. They want to hear from the person who's in it and living that experience every day. And I think it's really important. The CEO profiling for me goes so far. But when you start to look at what we're trying to do from the B2B side of things, which is demonstrate their expertise in a particular area, the CEO can't do that for you. It has to be the people who are on the ground working in those particular areas who we can push forward and make experts in their fields. And it gives them a personal presence, but it reflects really well on the company in terms of the values that the company has.
Yeah, for me, it has to be personality first. The whole reason of building an exec profile is that it needs to be authentic. And the only way it's effective is if it sounds like that person. If people think, oh, wow, I'm getting a real insight into that person, that business and the way they think. So it has to be personality first, to a really high percentage, because, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make with exec profiling, particularly on LinkedIn, is making the CEO, the leader's post sound exactly like the marketing posts. And quite often it's because the same person is doing the writing. But whenever there's too strong a corporate message, it just sends those alarm bells, ringing, and people immediately dismiss it. We're getting smart to content, and I think we have to respect the people who are consuming this content and let their personality lead.
I suppose the challenge you have to that is where the personality is not necessarily one that you would want to portray.
Yes,
as a corporate business, which is, and obviously that takes coaching, doesn't it? So that takes a lot more.
It does.
It takes that. There's a lot more involved in that, where you've got the executive profile that you want to push forwards, and that actually they're not necessarily the person you would want to put in front of the press, but you know that you need to, for all the reasons that you've already spoken about. It's that being able to coach them to a point where they've got 5 things that they need to get across in a conversation. They don't veer from that. They can add kind of some of their own personality to it, but not too much. But you know, that is a challenge. But the other challenge is, as well, I was just thinking when you were talking, is where the CEO is a founder and where their personality and the things that they would naturally talk about are so wound up in who the business is that actually it's really difficult to extract the corporate message from their message, because effectively it's one and the same. And we've got a client who the business is just celebrating its 60th anniversary. And when you hear him talk about his personal journey is so interwoven with the corporate message. You can't separate the two. They are essentially one and the same. So it might come across as him sounding very, very corporate, but actually he's just talking about the things that he truly believes in.
Yeah. And it's there's so many sort of challenges and benefits of the founder-led marketing side of it, you know, and that is one of them, that sort of enough separation, but actually that the intertwinedness of their story is very often what makes it such a compelling story. You know, telling their story through the company and vice versa can make it land really effectively.
Yeah, but actually, you know, just adding to that, there's a really interesting point in that, you know, often a business journey starts with everything being around that leader, like you said, and what they say. Certainly if they're sort of a dynamic face or they've got something different to say. But there comes a point in the business's growth and evolution where that needs to change. And at that point of change must be quite difficult. I mean, obviously, you know, you mentioned working at Dyson years back. You know, James Dyson obviously is a big part of the brand for that business. But there's probably also a need, not specifically with Dyson, but in a lot of businesses to kind of, where the comms team are thinking, well, we need to move away from this a bit, or we need to actually change the message. The message is very much that person. We mentioned a couple of other people earlier, you know, where comms teams must spend a lot of their time with their heads in their hands thinking that isn't actually the message we want to be pushing out to sell cars or do this or do that. I think the question is, where are the big challenges, I guess, and mistakes from a comms team perspective in that regard?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of common ones. One sort of that we just went through, the sounding too corporate, making it just too much like the marketing messages. So getting the tone right is really important. And the other one is to sort of think about the ask on the exec, because they do have a whole bunch of things to be doing. They have a business to run. And I think one of the mistakes I see comms teams doing is expecting that the CEO is going to sit down and she's going to read through every post. She's going to, you know, fine tooth comb it. You know, you want to get to a stage where you can really condense that process into taking up, you know, just a little bit of their time. So my clients, it's only an hour a month. I say, look, that's all I need from you. You know, if they know that in advance, saying, okay, I can find an hour, but, you know, you're only going to get one email, 1 hour, you know, setting those kind of expectations of what the process will look like for them, I think can make a big difference in actually making it a sustainable program. You know, it's asking them to sort of go from 0 to 5 posts a week is going to be too big an ask. So really adapting what you're asking to something that's manageable and sustainable for the exec you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what would actually be probably quite useful is just to know from this, in terms of the service that you provide, what specific outcomes do you focus on from that? Is it mainly social media content? Is it content from multiple channels? Are there sort of, you know, different areas other than that you focus on with leaders?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a LinkedIn specialist, so I'm pure LinkedIn. And for all its foibles, you know, it is brilliant. You know, it's whenever I'm talking to leaders about where they should start, I am biased, but I always start with LinkedIn because, you know, it has that professional focus. All of their audiences are there. You know, you've got your peers, you've got your investors, your shareholders, your employees, all in one place. So you get a big bang for your buck. And it's not that hard to stand out, you know, in a positive way. There's not a high proportion of LinkedIn users actually publish content. And the ones that do tend to be a little bit rubbish. You know, we've all scrolled through LinkedIn and thought, God, that's nonsense. So it's a platform where you can get really high reach and really effective cut through. So it's kind of a dream platform. It is the kind of default. I think about 50% of investors look for LinkedIn for the next investment opportunity. Journalists go there to find their experts. So it's just a massive gap in your profile if it's not working hard for you.
I think there's a fear factor, isn't there, in LinkedIn? I think with people who don't do it, they create a profile, they put it up there. That's tick, job done. I'm on LinkedIn. Yes, you are, but you've done nothing with it. And so we had a client who was in the exact space you've just spoken about, Rob, where they came along and said, we want thought leadership, startup company. We want thought leadership. We want X, Y, Z. We want to be in these publications. Great, but you're not saying anything at the moment, and you also don't have a product currently that we can showcase. So the first job is going to be building your LinkedIn profile and actually starting to comment on some of the issues that are affecting your customers or your potential customers, and make your profile stand out.
Why can't a leader just go out and do their own job of this?
Yeah, I guess the really short answer is because they're busy. We talked before about leaders having more on their plate, more expectations, more responsibilities, more reports. They are expected to be experts and into so many different things that it just doesn't make sense. I've got a client that I work with who's a really smart thinker around sort of productive, scalable businesses. And they always say, what makes the most sense for them to be doing themselves? What could only you do? And that's the sort of mindset that a lot of leaders come to me with. They could say, I've started this. I actually got really good results on LinkedIn, and now I'm really busy and I can't do it anymore, and it's that, being able to keep up the momentum is so key to success, but impossible to do when you're busy. You end up sort of in this paradox of what helps you stay busy, you're then too busy to do. So it really is a case of being smarter with their time.
Do you think then that's why some people don't do it in the first instance? Because they actually see the exponential growth of it, and they'll go, well, if I start it, I'm going to get to a point where I can't do this. So I won't start it in the first place because I don't want to get so busy that I can't devote time to it, even though I understand that it's important. And then they don't know that there are people out there who can do that job for them. They don't know that they can either bring in their own in-house marketing team in to work alongside them, which is, I think I've read that's what Richard Branson does. He spends an hour with them once a month, sits there and chats to them for an hour, and then says, right, you go off and write my blogs for me. You know what my views are. You go and do it, because I haven't got time to sit down and write 4 blogs. Don't have the time to do that. But it's that fear of, it takes on a life of its own. It becomes a beast, and you then can't control it. So why start it if I know I'm not going to be able to control it? Because the job of a leader is to push the things that they know that they can control and that they can keep a hold of and drive the business in the right direction. So a LinkedIn profile although it might seem like a small thing, could eventually be the thing that they go, that's just, it has taken on a life of its own and I can't control it anymore. So I'm either going to close it down and come off LinkedIn altogether, or I'm just going to go quiet.
Yeah, that kind of all or nothing thinking is classic of people either who haven't got started yet or who are afraid of getting started in the space, because, you see some people who are posting, 5 times a week more, and you think like, that's impossible. I haven't got time for that. And that's right. Most people don't have time for that. You don't need to sort of go up to that level. And it doesn't make sense for most leaders to be investing that time in that particular thing when, like you say, they can, outsource that and use their time more efficiently.
Yeah, I'm the guilty party there. I think, because I'd love to see a graph of my LinkedIn posts over a year versus the other things that were on my to-do list at the time, because it is the classic. It's like, I'll do this resolution, right? I'm going to do 4 posts a week or whatever. And then it dries up, and then, it'll be a quarter end, and suddenly there's loads of financial stuff to look at, or whatever. Or a busy new business period just goes completely off the radar. And I'm currently off grid at the moment, so I need to get back on in some way, shape, or form. But I actually, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile yesterday, you might not agree with this actually, but I put on my descriptor was like, PR agency boss. We do the following, contact me, blah, blah, blah. I've just changed it to something like, life's too short to be posting on LinkedIn, unless you've actually got something worth saying. I just thought I need to set out a stall that I'm not, I'm not going to just post on a weekly basis unless there's something I need to say, basically.
Yeah,
so.
But that's a rule that seems to go out the window for social media. It's such a, fundamental tenet of comms and good marketing, but people chuck it out the window with social media and say, oh, well, it's Tuesday. We have to post. It's Tuesday. And you're like, no, if you have nothing to say, don't post if what you've got to say is not worth reading, not worth listening to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also from a leader's perspective, it's probably different in a big business, but, quite often just realizing that you can talk about what you're doing as long as you've got an interesting perspective on it. It's like, why am I so busy? Why am I not able to post on LinkedIn? Well, because I've been doing 3 business pitches, or we've been having to sort of make some big financial decision or whatever. You might not be able to reveal everything about it, but there's a story in everything. So actually, I think finding the story in what you have been too busy to post on LinkedIn doing, even if you voice note it and then shove it through an AI or something like that, it gives you something to talk about, rather than just thinking, I'm not doing anything that's of value as a message to put out or anything at the moment. So.
Completely. And honestly, I'm always shocked by the number of people who, when I start working with them, they say, oh, but I haven't got anything interesting to say. I hear that so often. And, I don't know whether it's because we have a background in finding stories, but everyone has so many little interesting stories. And like you say, whether that's, what you learned from putting together those pitches, how you managed your time in that busy period, there is so many different bits you can pull out. And often having that external perspective from an agency, from a freelancer, from whoever, someone in your team to say, oh, actually, that's really interesting. I didn't know about that. It can help you pick out the stories a lot more clearly than you can for yourself. Yeah,
definitely. What would be a good kind of direction just to take the conversation now, I think, is to talk a bit about the end goal. We see all of the time, we're in the business of brand awareness, but we're more and more being tasked with, KPI'd on lead generation and sales. So how, what's the link when you come to exec profiling? It's a similar sort of model, I guess, but where do you see the real benefit from a lead gen perspective or a lead nurturing perspective?
Yeah, I find it really effective from a lead gen perspective. And I've got a couple of theories on why. But for me, the big one is that you're usually doing this for the most senior people in your business, right? It's not worked its way down to all of us yet, haven't got our own personal ghostwriters. But when you do that, they are speaking to an audience of their peers. And as you know, whenever you pitch for new business, your main aim is to try and get past the kind of paper clips and chairs manager. You want to get past that procurement hurdle and get to the people who are going to make the decisions, right? So if you're able to kind of leverage that relationship from your CEO, your VP, whoever, to their peers, you are immediately having that impact